All right, week 12 of college football. Ted, let's start in Athens, Georgia. An eye-popping spread. Number 7 Tennessee is a 10-point underdog to number 12 Georgia. This game will be 6:30 p.m. on ABC. It's one of those betting lines that you just stare at it and go, "What do they know that we don't know?" And sure, the game is in Athens. Georgia is coming off getting whooped in Oxford. They're going to be desperate because they've already lost 2 games. But how am I supposed to trust Carson Beck to cover a double digit spread against that Tennessee defense, Ted? No way, no how. What?
It's so hard. Georgia has been the most consistent football team over the last 6 years. I mean, right there with Alabama at the top at times, but they've been like, you know what you're getting pretty much week in, week out. Not anymore. They've kind of fallen into familiar territory with a lot of these teams that are like just below. Like we've had like top tier, which is the elite of the elite, and then there's a big group below that are capable of playing really good football, but also capable of not showing up some weeks. It feels like that's where Georgia is now, and that feels like that line is Georgia of a couple years ago, where you knew what you were going to get week in, week out. I don't know. It's very, very tough. Watching, there's been several times this year where you watch them and you say, I I feel like it's on the verge of not falling apart horribly, but you know, they could lose almost to anyone on a given week.
I was even more confused by the line when earlier this week Josh Heupel said that he expects Nico Iamaleava to be good to go for the game.
Yeah.
But then on Tuesday, you see Chris the Bear Felica saying that his sources are saying Nico actually has a bad concussion and they don't think he's going to play. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's, hey, the odds are that Nico Iamaleava is not going to play in this game. He's not going to get out of the concussion protocol. And yes, that certainly changes things when you're talking about a backup quarterback going and having to play for Tennessee on the road against that Georgia defense. But I still think they're going to lean on Dylan Sampson in that running game. They'll still take their shots down the field. That's their formula right now is run it with Dylan Sampson and then try to hit a couple of those go balls. That's what Tennessee wants to do. And if Georgia had issues blocking Umanmielen and Perkins for Ole Miss, I think they'll certainly have issues blocking the edge guys for Tennessee. I mean, James Pierce is better than any of those guys from Ole Miss. So I trust the Tennessee defense to go and play really well in this game, especially with how Carson Beck has been turning the football over.
Yeah. And yeah, 9 interceptions in the last 4 weeks, 5 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. Even Georgia, not immune to the turnover situation. When you watch that Ole Miss game, it kind of felt like Ole Miss found the formula, right? We're going to lean on our defense, try and turn them over, but you can run the football at them. You can stay fairly conservative, and Tennessee has a really strong running game. So I don't know. Now being at home is going to be a big edge for Georgia, but for teams that have been as good as Georgia has, when you lose a couple and things are way out of the ordinary, there starts to be a little bit of they you could get players in locker rooms that question things way sooner than maybe other places, right? Whenever things feel out of the ordinary.
You think the line's so big because Kirby Smart called that kid an idiot? He was that those were the actions of an idiot on the field at the Old Miss game. I don't care what that kid's statement says. Oh, they're my buddies. I didn't expect to see. Dude, you don't do that. Have some common sense, pal. And Kirby apologized for calling him an idiot, but he shouldn't. Those were the actions of an idiot.
And there's no other way to put it. So I had the perfect perspective to say to be able to hear all the noise, like hear Kirby say he was an idiot, then see the player's response to it, his statement. I got to see it all play out before I ever saw the video of it. And then, so the whole time I'm thinking, okay, so there's some family and friends there that he saw on the field. They're wearing Ole Miss gear. Surely this is being blown out of proportion. And then I saw the video. I'm like, nope, that guy's a total idiot. Complete, total moron. Just like Kirby said, nail on the head. No idea what the hell he's doing out there. Jumping up and down. Crazy.
We'll see how long he stays at Georgia. He started at Alabama. Now he's at Georgia. I don't know if there's any coming back from that one. I don't care what your statement. I don't care what your notes app statement says, bud.
I agree. I agree.
I have. I don't know if it is it's not a conspiracy theory. It's maybe just a bit of a hot take. Tennessee not having Nico Iamaleava in this game kind of sets them up for a perfect situation to make the playoff. Because they've got UTEP and Vandy left. If they lose this game, probably not going to play in an SEC championship game. Still have a chance, don't get me wrong. But I think the odds would be against them. But you would then be able to say,
yeah, we didn't have our quarterback then.
We didn't have our quarterback against Georgia. What do you mean? And that is something that the committee would have to take into effect. So if the goal is, which the goal is not, the goal for Tennessee this year is to win the SEC and to get a first round bye. But if you're just talking about making the playoff, Tennessee goes and loses this game. They don't have Nico. They're not going to drop out of the top 12 when the final rankings come out if they beat UTEP and Vandy to finish out the year. I mean, they're going to be in. So it's just an interesting way of thinking about it because, like you mentioned, the committee will go, well, they didn't have their starting quarterback. Especially if they go and play him close without him.
Right. And I don't even know who their backup is. Do you?
He came in for, do you remember he came in for the one play against Alabama and threw one of the most egregious YOLO balls you've ever seen. Gaston Moore, 0 for 1, one interception against Alabama. They won, but I watched it the other night. But yeah, so I would assume it'll be Gaston Moore if Nico can't go.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. Which part of it is you got to love hype that he's like, oh yeah, he's gonna play, and then like the behind the scenes is like, oh no, he's definitely out. It's great gamesmanship. I don't know. I think if he plays and he's good to go, I think Tennessee's got a very legit chance to go in there and beat Georgia. Not going to be easy. They're going to respond to the loss to Ole Miss, you would think. But they've definitely got the defense and the ability to press Carson Beck, who cannot be feeling good. His confidence has to be wavered. So I don't know. A lot on that game is going to depend on Tennessee's quarterback situation, but that ain't going to be all of it.
Give me Georgia to win the football game.
I agree. Wouldn't
Next
be a
game.
shock though.
Next game. Number 23 Missouri travels to number 21 South Carolina. This is an odd kickoff, 3:15 p.m. Central Time on SEC Network. The Gamecocks are currently a 12-point favorite. And according to Eli Drinkowitz, Missouri is still alive for the playoffs. So this is a big one, right, Ted?
Yeah,
I cannot believe we lost to that nerd. Oh my
I know.
gosh.
It is the absolute worst. It is the absolute worst thing ever. Just to have to sit back and listen to some of the stuff that he says.
And then he's talking about Coach Stoops. That guy. Oh my gosh. Just let's talk about this game. Let's not derail this.
Yep. Um, I think it's a big factor whether or
That
not.
guy would give his left nut for Bob Stoops' career.
Yeah. Yes.
God.
Yes, he would. Um, Cook is going to be a big factor in this game if he plays or not. I haven't heard. I don't know. I guess I kind of feel like it's going to be Pine, but not exactly sure. It would be a big factor for him to play, but even if he plays, I still think South Carolina wins. Like the problems that Missouri has had offensively are like the exact like they're running into what they would pick last to have to play against, right? And South Carolina's got it going. Sellers and their offense has gotten better and better and better, more consistent throughout the season. I I guess you can never really be super shocked in college football, but I think South Carolina absolutely owns this football game, and there's a chance they rout Missouri.
I'm with you. I think that South Carolina team has a ton of confidence right now. And they've got more dudes than Missouri has.
Way more.
And you mentioned Lenore Sellers and his improvement. Rocket Sanders has found
Yep.
the fountain of youth, apparently. I mean, he's been fantastic in these last couple of games for them. And then there's the defense. I think it's one of the best defenses in the country. They've got absolute dudes at the edge spots, and then they just fly around. They're physical at linebacker and in the back end of the defense, and they are making opposing offenses' lives miserable. And I don't see a path because I think the line reflects that it's going to be Drew Pine at the quarterback spot for Missouri. I just don't see how Drew Pine goes into that environment and just moves the ball up and down the field against that defense. I can't envision that happening.
No, I totally agree. I mean, you go back and you look at the game plan that they had against Oklahoma and pretty limited, and they were able to stay within that game plan because we couldn't ever separate on them. I expect South Carolina to be able to separate. And whenever you separate, you have to be able to start throwing the ball down the field. And if you're Missouri and getting more risky, and that plays right into South Carolina's hands. That is the last thing you want with that defensive line's ability to rush the passer. So, outside of South Carolina showing up and turning the ball over a ton, which was a big problem for them early in the season, I just don't see a way Missouri can really compete.
I suppose Luther Burden could have 300 yards.
Yeah,
But
he's
it,
the guy to
it
go off
seems
at any time.
unlikely.
Yeah,
Seems unlikely with how talented that South Carolina defense is. And I continue to believe the South Carolina is really, really good. And I think they're going to handle Missouri in this game. The playoff buzz for South Carolina is really going to start to build after this weekend.
Yep.
And they've got a massive one against Clemson to end the season, just like they do every year. And if you win that one, that's a 9-3 football team. They're going to be in the college football playoff.
I I'm kind of with you, and I kind of feel like, I mean, when you look at their schedule, the Ole Miss game sticks out, the 27-3, but they had LSU beat, and they got some horrible officiating down the stretch. Had a really good shot against Alabama to beat them in Tuscaloosa, played them super close. I mean, that looks good on the resume. And if like no coach would ever tell you this, but they're going to be looking for style points going into the finish line.
They are ranked 21st.
And the egregious ranking.
If you look at the teams in front of them, everyone would pick them to beat Boise. Everyone would pick them to beat SMU. They smoked A&M, who's ranked number 15. They'd be favored over Kansas State, Colorado, Washington State, Louisville, and then Clemson's one spot ahead of them. And that's gonna take care of itself the last week of the year.
Who would you pick between that South Carolina and Georgia right now on a neutral site?
I think Georgia would be favored, but it'd be hard not to pick South Carolina to win the football game, which sounds crazy, but it just feels like they've found a groove at the right time. It feels like they're peaking at the proper time of the season while Georgia is working through some stuff, especially offensively.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, they've been great. Just don't trip up. They still have a young quarterback, redshirt freshman quarterback that had some turnover problems early in the season. Those things can pop back up at any time. I think that's the one thing that could derail it for him.
I assume we both like South Carolina in the football game.
Yeah.
It's a big number. I think I'd lay it though. I think Missouri's going to have a really, really difficult chance or difficult time scoring in this game.
I agree. To me, it's again, it's college football. As soon as you're dead sure about something, that's whenever it's guaranteed to go the opposite direction. But it's hard to see a different path on that one. And then, I mean, like the one hope is that if you saw, because Missouri's totally different with Cook at quarterback, if he can move around, and they would love his mobility this week.
No doubt about it. Last game, number 3 Texas travels to Fayetteville to take on Arkansas. This is an 11 a.m. game on ABC. Texas is currently a 13.5-point road favorite. And really, I just want to fast forward to the Texas A&M game in College Station on the 30th. But the Longhorns have to take care of business in this one. They can't sleep on the Hogs, Ted. They got to go to Fayetteville and play well. You never know what can happen in a road game in the SEC, but it just feels like Texas is a superior team to Arkansas. The only thing that gives me a little hesitation is Sam Pittman said that Jaquindon Jackson is back practicing this week. And if Arkansas can get that run game going, and you throw, of course, what Taylor Green can do as a runner at the quarterback position, you combine that with Jackson. If they could get it going a little bit, then maybe this thing gets interesting. But it feels like Texas just has an advantage at essentially every position in this football game.
Yeah. How good do we think Texas is? Are we
Do we
sure?
think they're the third best team in the country?
No, I don't. Definitely not.
It with the way that the Georgia game went and the way that Georgia has looked since, it makes it very confusing. It makes Texas a very tough evaluation.
Because that's really the only true testing point that you have with them. I guess the Vanderbilt game is at Vanderbilt, they have a 3-point win. Does that signify that Vanderbilt game and the Georgia game? Those are the two teams that have been the most consistent this year. Does that just place Texas kind of right in the middle of the group with everyone else with no separation?
That's how it feels. But you got to rank someone number 3.
Yeah. And
And
they're
they
8-1.
have, they've only lost one football game. It was to Georgia. Now, they got housed on their own field, but it is interesting. And it kind of goes back to the point you've been making the last couple of weeks. Is anyone that good in college
Hey,
football?
you know, Arkansas fans hate Texas. They hate Texas. Like that is
Remember, Texas went there, what was that, 2021? And got smacked.
yeah.
Now, I don't know if any of these guys on this Texas team were a part of that one, but I'm sure Steve Sarkisian is reminding guys, hey, don't forget that game. We need to be focused. We got to be ready to go.
Yeah. Do you know who the number one offense in the SEC is?
The number one offense in the SEC from a yards or points perspective.
Yards,
Ole Miss.
total offense. That's correct. It's Ole Miss. They're number 2 in the country, number 1 in the SEC. Did you know Arkansas is the number 2 offense in the SEC? The number 5 offense in the country?
How about that?
I bet both. I did. I was shocked to see that the other day whenever I was kind of digging through some of the stats.
Do I even want to know where we rank?
The main game helped.
Oh, praise be. Don't organize it by
I mean, it
conference
didn't
games
help
only.
that much, but the main game helped. Kind of restack some of the stats there. But I was kind of fascinated to see that, which take from that what you want. It just tells me, especially with Jackson possibly playing, that he's practicing, like you said. They've got ammunition, and they're going to be at home. I think Texas is better than Arkansas, but in college football, that doesn't always matter.
There's a formula for
That's right.
Arkansas making this thing interesting and limit the explosives from all the playmakers that Ewers has at his disposal, and then dominate time of possession by running the hell out of the football.
Yeah,
It's not that crazy of a formula for Arkansas to play a really close game against Texas.
I agree.
I just want to be entertained. That's it.
Ewers has turnover issues at times, and that offense can kind of get stuck in the mud every now and then. So they need to get off to a hot start, be able to run the football, and make Quinn have to beat him from the pocket. So I mean, Texas, they're a huge favorite now. It's 13.5, and it's come down, but I mean, it's not hard to see this being a close game that Texas escapes.
Arkansas is a hard team to figure out.
Yeah. Who's not?
You,
Well,
you think about what they did against Tennessee and then what happened against Ole Miss. What's what team's going to show up?
yeah.
I I don't know. I'm sure Texas is hoping that the version that played against Ole Miss shows up.
A lot of that will have to do with how good Texas is early in that game too. Like if you show up, you're clicking, defense plays well, offense is moving the football, you can kind of take that crowd out of it to some degree. I mean, that'll have a big deciding factor in what type of Arkansas team you see.